Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock. At the end of September, President Trump invited Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla to the Oval Office to announce that the company and the administration had reached a deal on most-favored nations drug pricing. This was followed by similar announcements from AstraZeneca and Merck. But are these deals substantive policy or PR sleight of hand? We've invited Hogan Lovells partner Valder Curran back to the show to help get to the bottom of this question, and she's brought along her colleague Elizabeth Jungman, who's going to give us the skinny on the FDA's new priority voucher system and what exactly, if anything, the government shutdown means for the pharma industry. Welcome to the show, Alice and Elizabeth, and thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So, Alice, we have talked a lot about MFN on this show as the sort of information has trickled out. Now it seems as if a lot of the tariff conversation was meant to create this leverage so that the administration could directly make these deals with individual pharma companies and then announce them. What do you make of the deals that have been announced? Do you think this is going to create significant savings for Americans, or is there sort of a devil in the details here where it might not be as dramatic as it appears?
That's an excellent question, Jonah. I think it's fair to say that the deals wouldn't happen unless there was some give from the manufacturers. Otherwise, why would there be a deal, and why would the administration give them relief from Section 232 tariffs, which is what they get from these deals? But the amount of that give, the amount of the extra discounts that those companies that have entered into deals are providing is something that only they and the administration knows. What we know about those deals is really just from press releases, and all those press releases, both from the companies and from the administration, make clear that the terms of those arrangements are confidential. So we know the overall structure, but we don't, and in some cases we know the drugs, or at least some of the drugs that are involved, but we don't know the level of discount or the complete list of the drugs that are at issue.
And that was the sense I got. I watched the Pfizer announcement in total, and then I've read up on the others since they happened. The sense I got is that they're definitely highlighting certain cases where the savings look, I guess, the best. But even in those cases, I've read some reports that say, if you look at what Medicare or Medicaid was paying previously, this isn't that much of a change. I mean, what's your kind of take on even what we do know?
Again, we don't know. We really don't know. We know that on the Medicaid side, they're going to be offering MFN, most-favored nations-based pricing to Medicaid programs. Press reports, BioCentury had an article saying that they're doing that through supplemental rebate agreements with Medicaid programs, which has the benefit of keeping them out of best price and therefore out of 340B as well. And that's impactful because that only matters if the discounts would set best price, right? You don't need to use a supplemental rebate agreement to offer state Medicaid programs lower prices if it's not going to set best price. So now they might do it that way anyway, who knows? But that's an indicator that they're real discounts, or else you wouldn't need to use that, assuming that BioCentury press report is correct.
That's interesting. When we talk about kind of the big picture of MFN, do you think that what we've heard so far is going to move the needle on sort of the big problem of Americans pay considerably more for drugs than the rest of the world, this notion that we're subsidizing innovation? I mean, are we looking at anything sort of on the scale to sort of start to equalize those prices around the globe?
Time will tell. We've already seen some public announcements from manufacturers where they are setting their launch prices in European countries at higher levels and pointing to the MFN impact as the reason for that. And as we see new launches, at least for the companies that have entered into these deals, one of the other terms that's common across all three is the commitment to launch in any new products at MFN pricing, which means that they have to match it to whatever the MFN price would be in the comparator country. So that's sounds like it's a new baseline, but we will see what happens over the next several years.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way the two pieces of this interact, right? Because if you're a pharma company and you want to equalize prices between the US and the rest of the world, probably the best way for you to do that is to raise prices elsewhere, because that raises all of your revenues. But what the administration is seeking, from an optics perspective, is lower prices for Americans. So I imagine this deal making is a lot of kind of balancing those two things, so that everyone feels like they're winning, right?
Absolutely, as is true for every negotiation. But I would also point to one other term that's common to all three of the transactions or the deals that have been announced, and that is the commitment of the manufacturers to repatriate any increased foreign revenue that they obtain due to the Trump administration's America First trade policy. And it's unclear how that increased revenue will be quantified. Again, I'm assuming that that's probably dealt with in whatever these confidential arrangements are between the manufacturers and the administration. But one theory is that if it's because either prices go up on existing products or launch prices are higher because of the MFN policy, whether the administration would claim that as increased revenue for that needs to be repatriated.
What about the companies that aren't making deals or haven't announced deals yet? I mean, you said that the companies that are coming to the table are getting out of these tariffs. Are there companies that are starting to get hurt by these tariffs that haven't made a deal? Or are we still waiting to hear all the announcements? The White House does seem to be kind of trickling them out.
Right. That's my understanding too, is that the administration hopes to have more arrangements. That's just my general understanding. But the other thing to point to is that we have two demonstration projects that are still at OMB waiting to be released. One is on Part B drugs. That's the GLOBE demonstration project. And one is the Part D demonstration project for GUARD, GUARD. Those could include MFN provisions. We don't know because they haven't been announced yet. And there are also rumors that there's going to be a Medicaid MFN program being rolled out as well, which could just be, creating this pathway for supplemental rebates nationwide for MFN pricing, just sort of making that more generally available and more easily accessible to manufacturers writ large. None of those have been released as of today when we're recording it, but all of those terms could, or all of those vehicles could create pathways for MFN-based pricing, at least to Medicaid, even if you don't have, or Medicare B or Medicare D, even for companies that don't have deals. So we'll just have to wait and see if they do that.
Is actual progress on that potentially being affected by the shutdown, or?
Absolutely, that is possible. Absolutely, that is possible. We don't know exactly what's being moved along and what isn't. We know some stuff is. We've had some rules released, for example, on the Medicare side, but it's not exactly clear what projects are deemed in the category that they get support even during the shutdown.
So I want to bring Elizabeth in, and then we may come back to this at least to talk a little bit about the direct to patient aspects. But I know another kind of big part of this deal is bringing manufacturing to the U.S. And that, I don't know if various announcements sort of got mixed together, but there was definitely some talk from Martin Makary during the Pfizer announcement about simplifying inspection processes, and then shortly after that, they also announced this new priority voucher program. So, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about kind of what's changed recently for companies in terms of how they can work with the FDA and benefit from this, and what the give and take there is in terms of advancing the administration's agenda in terms of American manufacturing, drug prices, et cetera.
I think you're hitting on something novel that we're seeing in this administration is the use of FDA levers to drive policy in areas that are outside of FDA's traditional mission. And you're right. There is the pre-check program, which is what FDA calls its program of kind of providing extra handholding really to companies that are considering domestic manufacturing and sort of speeding up their process for getting the regulatory approvals that they need to onshore production. But there's also this Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program, which has a number of eligibility criteria. One of which is, willingness to onshore domestic. It has a number of criteria, which include onshoring your production. So firms that are willing to make product domestically are more willing to get or more likely to get a national priority voucher. And then also relevant to the conversation that you and Alice were just having, increasing affordability. So if you can commit to lowering U.S. prices to the MFN price or to reduce other kind of downstream costs, those are criteria that might make you eligible for one of those vouchers, in addition to more, traditional public health criteria.
How explicit has the administration made these criteria? I know they have a tendency to sometimes be a little vague, as Alice said, to operate in press releases. I mean, is there real guidance out from the FDA saying here's how you get one of these vouchers, or is it more of a let's make a deal situation?
They have publicly announced 5 criteria. So that is addressing an unmet medical need. This is the example they use in the announcement is something like if you could create a universal flu vaccine. The second criteria is delivering more innovative cures. So this is a real kind of breakthrough, game-changing therapy addressing a large unmet medical needs. This is where they're kind of pulling in priorities around rare diseases and chronic disease. But then the last 2 criteria are the ones we were just discussing. So onshoring, drug development and manufacturing, and then increasing affordability. So they kind of publicly announced that those are part of it, and publicly signal that you're going to need to be able to play ball on onshoring or affordability in order to put yourself in the best position for the voucher program. That said, it does appear that this is happening through a lot of kind of dealing, and that the companies, I believe it was 4 of the 9 vouchers that were awarded to companies that had not even asked for one. They had not, submitted an application to the FDA. The agency approached them and worked out deals that led to their getting these voucher programs. And so there's definitely some, behind the scenes dealing over a broad range of issues. And I think that's the thing that we're seeing that I can't think of good examples in prior administrations where the use of FDA levers like fast review times has been used to sort of drive policy that's really outside of the space.
Yeah, I mean that is absolutely fascinating to me. I agree with you. I've been covering this space, for more than a decade, and it's always seemed to me as if sort of the FDA is its watchwords are safety and efficacy, and
Right.
everything that they do is geared around one of those two things. But now we have sort of the FDA using its levers um, for things that aren't related to safety and efficacy, really. As you say, policy priorities, political, economic priorities. It's interesting to see the ways that this administration um, innovates. Almost seems like a strange word, but they are. I mean, they're exploring new territory of how the federal bureaucracy and the sort of political arm of the administration can work together and buoy each other. And I do wonder if that's something that's going to persist beyond this administration, if we're going to see those sorts of tactics in future Democratic administrations, as other administrations that aren't quite as inherently iconoclastic as the Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously hard to predict, but I think it's going to be a bell that's hard to unring. That, once you've started using FDA levers for these kinds of policy objectives, that, it's going to be very tempting for any future administration to do the same thing. But I think you're absolutely right. It is and it's not like this is the first administration to be concerned about drug pricing, right? That's been a topic of heavy conversation for years. And, I was part of those conversations where FDA was, being asked to put things on the table. What could FDA do to address the drug pricing situation? And FDA's historical answer has largely been, we can approve generics and we can approve biosimilars. Like those are the things we can do, right? Like we create, better competition in the market, and that's what we can do about drug pricing. And here we're saying, well, we could offer faster review times, which are really meaningful in terms of, the monetary value to companies. Well, we can offer faster review times to companies that commit to changing their pricing policies. And, that's really a new thing. And it's going to be, it'll be hard, I think, to completely, put that genie back in the bottle now that
And
it's out. And so then I think the question is just, what are the trade-offs?
as far as you know, there's nothing statutory or constitutional against this kind of use of the FDA.
I think that's right. I mean, FDA has always had the ability to prioritize how it conducts its reviews, and historically that has been, public health rationale and things like during COVID, right? I think every manufacturer had an application into the agency that was not for a COVID product during COVID. They expected that COVID products were going to jump the line; they were going to leapfrog, and you want that, or you want the agency to be able to prioritize how it does its reviews, um, based on the various factors that it has to consider. And so, this is just another way of allowing the agency to reprioritize reviews. We've seen it in the generic space where the agency will prioritize the review of ANDAs that are coming into a space that is not already competitive. So they will take a first generic application above the 13th generic of another product, and review that more quickly. So you've sort of seen that a little bit already in the space. So yeah, I mean, I think they have the ability to do it. I think at some point these may get challenged, and there will be winners and losers here, and you will see um, competitors leapfrog other companies. And get to review and get to market faster, establish markets. And I imagine that industry is going to have something to say about that, and we may see challenges, but I think it'll be hard.
So let's jump back for a minute and talk about this TrumpRx thing, this DT, your direct to patient, as another means for lowering drug prices. This is one it feels like so far it's a lot of talk, and we haven't seen much action, and we don't have like a date for when this thing is actually going to go live. So what are you hearing? What do we know about TrumpRx, if anything, right now?
Well, we have a website, and the website I think says coming January 2026. So we have that, but how it's going to work, whether it's going to have its own links to direct to patient options, whether it instead is just going to take patients to manufacturers, websites with their direct to patient programs, or some other third parties, is hard to know. I can see the benefit of having a single clearinghouse that everyone knows to go to for any drugs. There are a couple of those out there already. But we don't really know. We don't know if it's going to be just a portal or if it's actually going to have some infrastructure to it other than linking to pre-existing clearinghouses.
I mean, I'd put my money on a portal, but we'll see. It does seem like they're almost taking cue from Obamacare, right? That was how the ACA ultimately ended up operating, not as a government-run insurance, but as a portal that was everyone knew where to go, that directed them to private insurers. Maybe I'm going too far drawing that parallel, but it's an attractive way for the government to operate, right? The cost is low, but the effect is potentially larger, right?
For sure. I mean, manufacturers have these programs now. They had them before these MFN deals were announced. There have been direct-to-patient programs around probably for at least a decade. Not a lot of them, but they've been around. So manufacturers know how to set them up. They know the vendors to use. There are a few different ways to operationalize them, and that has a lot to do with the type of product you're talking about. But they exist now, and so I can see value in having a single point of entry or one-stop shop for where patients can go to find them. But I'm not sure it will always be the only place where you can get it. I'm sure they'll be able to find it other places. But I can see the value of that. It makes it easy for folks to know where to look.
Yeah, I wonder if it would also be able to integrate sort of prescription drug discount programs like GoodRx or like Mark Cuban's Cost Plus. I know he's mentioned that he wants to work with the administration on this.
It's interesting. As someone who works in the industry, I know a lot about all the different ways that manufacturers work to reduce patients' out-of-pocket exposure. And what is obvious to me is clearly not obvious to other folks. I was talking to someone the other day who was worried about their out-of-pocket cost for a new therapy they were on. And I said, oh, well, have you gone to drugname.com? My guess is that if you go there, the manufacturer has some sort of copay assistance program. If you're not covered by your payer, they might have a patient assistance program you could go to. Those are very, very common with innovator products in particular. And this person I was talking to is a very sophisticated business person, had no idea that these options existed. And so I do think that there is probably room for both educating the populace about these sorts of programs that manufacturers have, really for any innovative therapy that's out there, pretty much, but also making it much easier for patients to know where to find them.
The cynic in me would say that perhaps the companies benefit from these programs being largely unknown, because then they can have the good PR of saying, oh, we offer this drug at this low price, without actually having to offer that drug at that low price to too many people.
You can be the cynic. I will tell you, in my experience, manufacturers want these programs used. They really are committed to getting patients on therapy. And the last thing that they want to do is have an out-of-pocket cost be a barrier to that. So that actually, and in all honesty, that has not been my experience before. If they set up these programs, they want them used.
That makes sense, because the people who benefit from patients paying more are probably not the manufacturers. They're probably the insurers and the PBMs and the middlemen.
It could be. I mean, that's a pretty fraught issue, Jonah. So, and maybe a whole separate podcast that we could talk about benefit design and whether there needs to be reform in how commercial payers work.
We have about 10 minutes left. I want to talk about the shutdown. First and foremost, I think, Elizabeth, I'd love to bring you back in to talk a little bit about what effect is the shutdown having on the FDA? I think at first I was not hearing a lot, but recently, as it's dragged on, I've been hearing that there are some timelines being impacted potentially. What have you heard?
Yeah, so as you know, and as your listeners likely know, FDA is situated somewhat differently than other government agencies in the shutdown because it's funded through a combination of both federal appropriations and user fees that are paid by industry. So about half of FDA's budget comes from user fees, and that's why we hadn't seen the kind of immediate effect of the shutdown as much in FDA as in other federal agencies. At the end of every fiscal year, the user fee programs will have a balance of remaining unspent funds. And during a shutdown, those carryover balances can be used to continue to fund user fee activities, which is generally kind of any kind of review activity. So FDA has continued to review drug and biologic and device applications and has continued certain policy related projects related to review. And so, that work is continuing for now. There are, of course, many furloughed workers at the FDA that provide other kind of support functions that are not directly involved in review. And so, as the shutdown drags on and on, the strain from not having those other functions available becomes more apparent at the agency. And I think you're going to see as it gets longer, recovery is going to take longer as well.
I've got a couple of FOIAs out with the FDA. I doubt any movement's happening on those during the shutdown.
Right. Exactly. But it is, 86% of the workforce is still coming into work. About 66% of those are funded by user fees. And then there's another 19% that are designated as accepted because they perform what are considered to be critical safety functions. That's gonna, that will continue for as long as those carryover balances last. But analysis that's based on FDA's most recent financial plans suggests that PDUFA and GDUFA will run out of funding sometime in mid-December, and MDUFA and BSUFA will continue into the first quarter of 2026. So once that funding runs out, the folks who are still there for critical safety work will remain on duty, but all of the people, that's kind of 66% of the folks who are there right now, who are funded by user fees, those people will have to stop work.
It does seem like it's interesting to me that the shutdown is fundamentally about healthcare, right? That's the Democrats' sticking point issue, is these Obamacare subsidies. And so I do wonder if anything can break the stalemate, if it's going to be something related to healthcare, right? Something where, people start seeing the effect on their healthcare costs. But I'm not sure what that would be. And I'm not sure if something as sort of distant from the patient as drug approvals is going to have anything, the power to sort of make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take a little while, I think, for the patient to feel the effects. So for right now, the thing that the agency cannot do is accept new applications because new applications have to be submitted with a fee, and um, until the government reopens, the agency cannot accept those fees. And so, that ultimately means that patients are going to get access to those drugs a little bit later than they might have otherwise gotten access to those drugs. And certainly, once the government reopens, I think we can expect a backlog of yeah, there will be a bolus of applications that have been waiting to be submitted that are going to kind of come in all at the same time, and that may strain the agency's resources. But it's hard for patients to have a lot of visibility into what they're missing by not having those drug products approved, sooner. And frankly, kind of just getting back to the conversation for a moment about the voucher program, I think that's another place where it's there's going to be a lot of visibility into which companies and which products benefit from that voucher program. And there's not going to be a lot of visibility into who is getting passed over or skipped over or pushed back in line because of the voucher program, particularly as it gets bigger. So they're both places where I think you're right that it may not be obvious to patients what the impacts are.
Alice, any other areas where the shutdown could potentially have an effect on the pharma industry? Folks, our listeners, that we haven't mentioned or talked about?
Well, I think the potential demonstration projects are a key item. We're waiting to see those. I think those are something that the administration is really interested in getting out. But if they can't get funding or they don't designate those as priority or qualifying, that's something we're looking for. And then looking at the rules, but we've seen the physician fee schedule rule come out. We're expecting the hospital outpatient rule to come out shortly. So at least those are coming out, but those have real deadlines, right? Those need to come out in order to run the Medicare program as of January 1. So those are our programs, at least, that we're seeing some prioritization so that those programs can continue to operate.
Great. We just have a few minutes left. Anything else on your guys' minds, on your radars, on your clients' minds that we haven't discussed yet? I just saw a breaking news update. Apparently, Lilly and Novo are about to announce their White House deals. So we already know that by the time this comes out, it'll be out of date.
We'll see what those terms look like and how they compare to the press releases on the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, notable in that now we're crossing with the GLP-1 stream, so that might certainly get a little more public attention on this, given the visibility of those drugs.
Could be. We'll see.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me. This is really great. I certainly learned a lot. Elizabeth, I didn't realize that that the FDA was sort of insulated from the shutdown because it makes some of its own money. That's very, very interesting. But then at the same time, it's not allowed to make any more of its own money until the shutdown's over.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll Alice, we'll wait and see when there's some real information here and we can circle back and talk about it, right?
Yeah, let's maybe circle back once we see what these demonstration projects look like. See what there is to talk about those.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much. I hope that this has been as illuminating for our audience as it has been for me.
Thank you, Jonah.
Thanks for having us.
That concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments, at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your podcasts. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit the website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's PharmaPhorum. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.